works that way now, and every time I go live, it's like somebody else goes live. So
Of course.
I stopped caring. So we're live now, so hopefully we'll get at least a couple people in here.
Fantastic. I think Eric Brandt's live as well at the moment. So he was doing some gift.
You're getting replay.
Oh, was it?
What the heck? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out what the heck was going on with that.
Sure.
I think it's just something screwy with the speakers I have. But I'm getting replay. Oh, wait, hold on. I think I know. Duh.
How's it going, Lanley?
I figured it out. I had opened another window to this stream to grab the chat window from it, and I forgot to mute that window. So I was getting double feedback. Hey, Blind Justice, Flathead, Land Lee, Cool Media. Oh, PMP News, what's up, brother? We got a few cool people in here. So, Cool Media, first time seeing your name. Hello. But, you know what? Before, I forgot to grab it. Something I'm working on here. But, I don't know if you're into robotics at all, but.
What is that?
It's a robot I'm building. It's got 4 legs right now I'm working on, but it'll have 6 legs when it's done.
Nice.
But I'm building the whole thing from scratch, every single part. This is a mock-up. I'm going to be pouring the new pieces out of epoxy resin. So this was kind of, working out the kinks, and it's a little bit bigger than I wanted it to be, but
sure.
That's the Boak microcontroller board there.
Nice.
And underneath
That's
here,
crazy.
I made a custom circuit board to control all the servos.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's 3 servos per leg at 6 legs, so 18 servos just for the legs.
Wow.
So
yeah, I've been looking into Arduinos and programming those, and it's there's so much I need to know for that I've been getting a little over my head, but that's crazy.
Yeah, I've been working on this for off and on for about a week and a half now. So, Cece, duh, I forgot you changed your name to that. Constitutional Corner. She's well versed in law too. She actually she worked out of a law firm out in California for a while. Yeah, hey guys, Chi-Town, what's up, man? So, as you can see, I got Blue Bacon on here. We just want to, we were talking about Eric Brandt and his cases and what people think about it and whether or not we think it'll hold up. And Blue Bacon is very well versed in law, a lot more so than me. So I asked him on here to kind of help give us a better understanding of what's going on from a legal perspective. So with that said, I know you've had a chance to kind of review Eric's cases. Sorry for the dinging. I have to keep adjusting the volume till I get the tweaks right. But yeah, Blue Bacon. So what do you think of the convictions? I'll start with that. The 2, the threats and the disturbing the peace.
Yes, that was a fun one. That had some interesting stuff to it, and I did learn a little bit about Colorado law, which is where this took place. I do want to discuss what happened in the video to those who may not have seen it, or just as a refresher to those who have. Eric went to, I believe it was the courthouse, and he had an application for a public defender, which is form JDF 208. And he was only given the first page. And I believe, based on the circumstances of the video, that he actually was given that in person, that form. Now, his complaint was that they gave him an older version and they didn't include a second page. If you go to the court's website, which he did, it does include a second page, but the second page isn't actually necessary to file the application for a public defender. All it does is it explains certain things. For example, you have to provide proof of income. He was very upset because the form he was given did not tell him to provide proof of income. But since it appears he was handed that in the courthouse, in one of the rooms in the courthouse, with his initial upset behavior being based on that doesn't really make sense, because that information is posted, and he films it in his video. He shows, look, they say I have to have this, but they didn't give me that information. Whereas if you print it online, it does give you that information. So they're giving an incorrect form. I want to point out is that second page is not necessary for that application. It just gives out relevant information, which was present in the place where he got that form. Now, one of his buddies did request the second page of the form, and they were given that second page of the form without issues. Eric Brandt did not do that. He instead chose to, I don't want to use the phrase lose his goddamn mind, but that seems the most appropriate way to talk about it. He just started screaming at this secretary, saying things like, yeah, you've messed with the wrong bitch now. Repeating, you will comply, you will comply. He left, came back, continued. And then when a police officer arrived, he calmed down, left on his own volition. Now, as far as disorderly conduct based on noise, I don't think anyone is really arguing that. Even he said, like, yeah, that makes sense. I did get a little heated. And since this was a non-public forum, they can absolutely restrict the level of noise that you are operating at. However, when it comes to threats, generally, when you threaten someone, it has to be a direct threat. You have to have a target. You have to have an action. You have to say, I will hurt you. And there are different types. You have conditional threats, which are not generally considered threats, which is, I will hurt you if you do this thing. Now, Eric didn't say either of these things. There was no threat. However, I believe, and I haven't seen the paperwork. I asked you if you had seen the paperwork. I guess none of it's been released yet. What exactly he was charged with, because Colorado has a law called menacing, and menacing is generally what you would be charged with if you're making threats. And in Colorado, it doesn't require an actual threat. It basically requires someone. It requires a reasonable person to be afraid for their safety, or it requires a situation in which it wouldn't be unreasonable for a person to fear for their safety. It turns out that a person doesn't actually have to be afraid for their safety. It just has to be reasonable that they would be. And I looked that up. I have a list of a couple of things. I have a VISO law, which is they talk about the Colorado menacing law, where they say Colorado menacing law isn't about how the other person responded. It's about what the person charged knowingly did. And then it goes on to state that the alleged victim does not actually have to be afraid, and you don't specifically have to intend to scare the person to receive these charges. You have, let me see what other, I'm sorry, that was, okay, yeah, no, that's correct. And then the Colorado Legal Defense Group says that making a criminal threat involves threatening physical harm, which didn't happen, or, among other things, placing another person in fear of imminent serious injury, which can be charged under menacing. So I think based on the circumstances, it's not unreasonable to believe that losing your temper on someone like that might put them in fear for their safety. And regardless of the fact that there was a glass divider in the way, there's still enough room for him to, I mean, I thought he was going to throw that clipboard at her through the little gap between the glass and the desk. if I had been in that circumstance, if I had been that secretary, I certainly would have been ready to defend myself against some sort of assault, either directly from him or from objects he had thrown. Now, he didn't end up throwing those objects, which is really good for him legally, but his actions apparently were enough for the prosecution to convince a jury that he had violated that law, assuming that he was charged under that specific one. Now, could he win an appeal? Absolutely. And I think he should appeal this. It will generate some very exciting case law, I'm sure. And Eric Brandt is no stranger to generating interesting case law. If you ever seen his thing on jury nullification, that one's a very good read if that's what you're into. He won that one, and good for him for winning it. But in this case, jury thought that he met the elements of the crime.
Well, now my question there on that, and I said this on my last stream because it threw me for a loop, is when I heard that the jury went back and returned in less than 5 minutes. Yeah. Like literally, it was they walked in, said guilty. Yep, okay, let's go. I mean, it was like, to me, that just I find it's hard to understand. It's hard to comprehend. It's because your camera is shaking up and down a little bit.
Gotcha. Let me see if I can stabilize it, because I have it on a unstable surface. Give me just 1 second to fix my headphones. All right,
all right, yeah. So it just, I mean, in a way I understand, because it's like, yeah, like you said, he lost his mind. I mean, there isn't there's only so many ways you can word that. Right. He was Eric. He went ballistic that day, and so, well, sorry, Silver. There's nothing more we can do about that. That's StreamYard's doing it. I apologize, because his camera's stable, so it's not him. But it just threw me for a loop, man. That they were, it's like they should be required to at least discuss, associated law versus evidence, even if they were, even if he is guilty. Just to me, it seems so fast.
It does, and I'm not terribly experienced with the jury procedures as law enforcement. They didn't have me on a jury, and as former law enforcement, they're still very hesitant to send me a summons. So I've never been on a jury. I have testified in court, but they kept me separate from those proceedings. From my understanding, though, I think the jury, during a recess, they can discuss it amongst themselves, and it's basically the prosecutors and defendants. It's their job to convince the jury one way or the other. So I assume, based on the arguments presented and the defense presented for both sides, it was a compelling argument against him, and the jury didn't need much time to deliberate. It is a very fast decision, though, or at least I would think so, but I'm not an expert on how fast they usually go for.
Yeah, a lot of people said the same. It's like it was his behavior that was the clincher. I mean, to me, it was like, yeah, they walked back there and they, first thing they say is disturbing the peace. Hell yeah. Right. Let's just throw guilty on the plate and go, because let's face it, we all know most jurors just want to go home.
Yeah. A lot of people don't want to be there. I would love to be there, honestly. Like, I hope I get a summons, because I'm fascinated by the legal process. And if you've never had the opportunity to sit in on a court situation where you're in the viewer area, whatever it's called, if you're interested in law, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. Maybe it's something I enjoy and I'm weird for it, but I've always been sort of fascinated by it. So it's worth learning more, I think, about the court process, for sure, because I think Eric doesn't really understand how the law works as well as he thinks he does. And that translates into him accusing police officers of being tyrants, when in reality they're doing their job correctly, and sometimes they aren't. But I've seen enough situations involving him where I think it wouldn't hurt him to sit down with someone more knowledgeable in a legal setting to really have a conversation about how the entire judicial system works. But unfortunately, I can't give any real good information on that jury taking that long.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just one of those things. It was like, once I heard it was a jury trial to begin with, I was like, yeah, he's getting guilty verdict. I mean, let's face it, the average Joe sees some guy standing there screaming and yelling and ranting and raving over seemingly nothing.
Right.
And instead of, trying to work it out with them, just amping it up. And, to me, I always say, I can't tell other people how to audit. I can't tell other people how to act. As long as they're legal, that's what matters. In this case, no, he did not directly threaten them, but I can see them saying, I felt threatened.
Right. And under menacing, it doesn't require a direct threat like you would see in other states. Menacing, I mean, keep in mind, people, that Colorado has its own state laws and other states might treat this differently. If you're going to engage in this type of behavior, it is very important to learn your individual state and know exactly how far you can go. And I want to bring up the sort of auditing community in general. Some of the bigger channels have been very aggressive over the last, it's becoming more and more aggressive. And we see the infiltration of this movement by people who are just in it to make money. And one of the best ways to make money is to be aggressive.
Yep.
It gets you views. It's real easy views, and you get money from views. So the problem is, to compete with the other channels that are doing this, you have to keep stepping it up. And then you go too far, you're going to get arrested. And I mean, after a certain point, a lot of auditors will stop trying to learn the law, because why would they? They have a successful financial sort of situation going on. Why learn the law when they're earning money just fine? And so you see this. Auditing America has gotten to that point. SGV News First has got himself in trouble doing that. I mean, who was the other one? There's one I discussed a few months ago. He got arrested in July. Ian McGuire, who ran Hate the State, is at that point. He's beyond that point. He's still in jail, I believe. He's still going through the trials, but they just escalate it to a point. They were like, well, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then they got to a point where they're still saying I can do this, but the point they shouldn't have crossed was here. And I think it's important not to get caught up in what you're allowed to do and not take advice from someone like me. I was in Eric Brandt's live stream just the other day, correcting a few people. And I gave him real information that was absolutely valid about how traffic stops work. And I was immediately attacked by his followers. And I expect that. I'm in a place where I'm not really welcome. But you have to understand that I'm not against you guys. I'm not against the movement. In fact, I support the right to film when done correctly in a public place. But if I'm giving you information, it's because I'm trying to help you. And a lot of the people involved in the auditing movement, not just the auditors, but some of the people that follow the movement, are very much not out there to learn how to do it correctly, but just out there to hate the police. And you can hate the police all you want, but there is information that you should learn to help you.
No, I get it. Yeah, and for the new people that just came in, if you're not familiar with Bacon's channel, he's neutral. He's an information hub. The guy studies law. He's former law enforcement. I've had the pleasure of talking to him a few times now, and I fully support what he does. So if you appreciate me and what I do, then take my word for it. He's not out here to try and put anybody down. He's not out here to try and make anybody look bad. He's simply trying to provide us with information, period. And
now, there are a few videos I have where I do kind of make people look bad. I'm not going to say that there aren't auditors that
But no, but I'm saying that there are people that make themselves look bad.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sorry, but I personally do not agree with the whole yelling and ranting and raving and carrying a sign that says "kill the cops." And I don't agree with that. I'm more power to Eric. He's done many great things in the past.
Sure.
I always say that he's a very brilliant man, but I don't agree with the level of aggression he has reached and the people that are mimicking him. You know, Eric has a lot of people don't realize Eric has a lot of followers now.
17.9 thousand.
You know, I mean, his channel raised over $10,000 cash in less than 24 hours to bail him out. Now, that was done on the assumption he would most likely be rearrested immediately and then have another bond posted.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, you know, that shows you Eric has a lot of support. And the people that are mimicking him don't. A lot of them, they have their new channels or whatever, and they expect to just come on here and, you know, no, I don't agree with engaging in civil disobedience, but you get a lot of new people that want to mimic him, but they don't have the following that he has. So if they get arrested, you know, they're not always going to be able to raise $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 to get out of jail. So that's why I keep thinking, you know, you can do your own auditing your own way, that whatever you choose to do. All I say is be legal. Maybe like Blue just said, know your local laws. Make sure you understand the difference between menacing and threats. And then you have to consider stuff like this situation here. Yes, those were misdemeanor convictions, but Eric is sitting on a felony right now. Retaliation against a presiding judge. That's not a little thing. And the fact that they found him guilty of threats for making some secretaries feel uncomfortable. Think about that. Secretaries, judge. Secretaries, judge. I mean, he's almost guaranteed they're gonna guilty. I mean, it's gonna, you know, just because of his reputation, his past, and now if this threats conviction holds up, you know, that pretty much backs the whole retaliation charge, right? I mean, am I wrong in thinking that?
I don't know how much of an effect this is actually going to have. It's not going to help him, that's for sure. As far as the judge thing goes, I think there's a lot of the concern is, well, I have the freedom of speech, therefore I should be able to say these things. And he had a video where he basically said, look, I wasn't calling for imminent lawless action, therefore my speech is protected. I do want to discuss the Supreme Court decisions surrounding the ability to make threats against someone and have them protected by speech. We have Terminiello versus Chicago, which is states that it references Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, which essentially is a ruling that states that fighting words are not protected under the First Amendment. And it says, this is why freedom of speech, though not absolute, is nevertheless protected against censorship or punishment. This is referring to other parts of the case, unless shown likely to produce a clear and present danger of a serious, substantive evil that rises far above public inconvenience, annoyance, or unrest. So in that one, we have, look, if you're doing something that's a clear and present danger, and it's that danger is more than an inconvenience, that's not protected. You have Brandenburg versus Ohio. Freedoms of speech and press do not permit a state to forbid advocacy of the use of force or of a law violation, except where such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action is likely to incite or produce such action. Now, that's really important because that's what I think Eric is sort of basing his defense on. He's like, look, it wasn't imminent lawless action. I advocated that we kill some police officers, but it's not imminent. And we have Hess versus Indiana, in which the Supreme Court ruled that advocacy of illegal action at some indefinite future time is not imminent. So just based on his call to action, he had a video where he said, and most of his videos are no longer public now, where he basically said, I advocate for the murder of judges and police. Go out and kill a police officer today. Kill them. I support that, right? That's not an imminent call to action. That's a call to imminent, or that's a call to lawless action, but it's not imminent, so it technically should be protected. However, he does have 17.9 thousand followers that received that call to action, if you would consider that, but it's not enough right there. However, then you have a video where he talked about how he would kill a judge, and I believe he was discussing the use of rifles to do so. AR-15s, I think, was brought up. Again, it's really hard to put together the timeline because he has made a lot of his videos unsearchable through YouTube. And I don't have the link, so I had to find mirrors. I had to find news reports and sort of piece them together myself. So not all of this might be incorrect, but it certainly doesn't seem that way. I don't think it would seem that way to a jury presented, because the prosecution can absolutely subpoena those videos from YouTube and get the full things. So assuming I'm correct, not only has he said kill police officers and judges, he's discussed the means to do it, and then he made a phone call, and I've heard the actual phone call where he calls the office of a judge that he didn't like and says, I wish and I pray and I hope, I'm paraphrasing, but that you are brutally murdered and that your brains are splattered over the faces of your children. So not only does he have a call to lawless action, he has a method and he has a target. And so when you individually, all those pieces aren't going to add up to threats against a judge, and individually they're all probably going to be protected under the First Amendment, with the exception of the call, which is technically electronic harassment. But when you piece them all together, it gives you a bigger picture of, he's telling 17.9 thousand people, kill a judge. Here's the way to do it. Here's the target, right? And he might not have intended that, but when you put it all together, any one of those followers could take that seriously. And it would not be hard to prove that, yeah, if someone thought that was a good idea to kill a judge, they might think that this is a legitimate thing. And if there was any action taken against that judge, Eric would absolutely be liable for at least some of that, for potential, or he'd potentially be liable. It would definitely come up in conversation, that's for sure. So I think he got carried away and he didn't realize all of the pieces he was putting together. And it's just that example of going too far without realizing it. And he could win, but he easily could end poorly for him.
Yeah, Maddie, Constitutional Corner, wants to join in.
Sure.
She's aware of you and your channel. She's said before that she likes your channel, and
I appreciate that.
She, like I said, she's also in, studies law. She's worked at a law firm, all that. So she's definitely a lot more qualified than I am too. But yeah, it's like I said, he's pushed the limit a lot, and this time he may have pushed too far. And we all know that they're going to want to make it an example of him. And, what better way to make an example of him than to outright throw him in jail? Throw the book at him, nail him to the wall. And that's why I kept saying, yeah, he's done great work. Why can't he repeat what he's done? Why feel it necessary to push and push so hard when you've already established that you can make change without all the screaming and yelling and whatnot? All right, hold on. I'm gonna pop her in here.
Sure.
Constipated News.
Hi guys.
Hey, just so you guys know, I use speech to text, so you can't talk over each other or I won't be able to understand you. So I'm just going to kind of back off and let you two chat. if you guys don't mind, you guys kind of take over a little bit for a while, and I'll just read.
Well, first of all, I love your channel there, Blue Bacon. You're doing a good job out there.
Thank you.
I think that this is all going to come down to, in the end, past videos. They're going to pull his channel. They're going to show the jury his channel. And unfortunately, because I got to tell you, I really respect what Eric Brandt is trying to do.
Sure.
I have a lot of respect for those Colorado guys out there. They're really facing some corruption. I've had problems with the Louisville Police Department out there. I know that they're all corrupt. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to put them all in bank.
Sure. I don't know anything about them, so.
But I lived out there. I lived in Boulder, and
Gotcha.
I used to work in Louisville for another attorney, for a tax attorney. So I've got a lot of experience out there, and I can tell you that it's really frustrating. I think what Eric is going through, I think that what he's going through right now is something that, you and I couldn't really comprehend. His hell has just been boiling over with these people, and it started out with a ton of false charges. I mean, this guy has been, charged time after time after time. How would you feel, and how would you respond to this? So I think he does have a little bit of leeway there, just with the fact that he's been picked on. He's had a lot of false charges put on him, and he's frustrated. However, jury appeal, as you and I both know, jury appeal is going to come down to everything.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, because I think Eric is one of our top activists. I mean, he's really out there, trying to do it. He's really, putting his butt on the line. And unfortunately, he's not, he's not well matriculated in the writing portions of this. But that shouldn't really matter. You shouldn't have to be able to excite and exercise your rights and to excite people around you to do it. I think that, there's a lot of people that get into this movement, like you said earlier, that really, they have a good idea. They kind of understand this and that, Smith versus Cummings down here in Florida, or Fordyce versus Seattle out in California, or all these other cases, Turner versus Driver down there in the Fifth, or whatever. You have all these court cases, and a lot of people start seeing that. And that's how I actually got started. That's how I actually 10 years ago became interested. Right now I'm currently in Law 101 at Post University.
Good.
I'm pursuing my undergrad, and then I'll go towards my attorney. But when what I see here, and it's so unfortunate, because I actually really do love Eric. I really do. He's got himself in a really tight pickle.
Sure.
Well,
I'm not going to say I support the manner in which he does it, but I do appreciate the things he's done. I've read a bunch of the cases surrounding him, and he's generated some really good case law for the movement. However, I've reviewed his arrest record in the state of Colorado, and it is extensive. And I don't know how much of that is real, how much of it is corruption. I know a lot of stuff has been dismissed, and a lot of stuff he's gotten acquitted for, but he's also been found guilty of a few things. Now, I've only seen a limited amount. I haven't actually read through the cases, so I couldn't really comment on it. But I think him getting upset about being arrested is strange, because he seems to be wanting to be arrested so that he can then show that the arrest was unlawful. But it's gotten to that point where he's getting arrested and then getting acquitted, or it's getting dismissed. Right. He's getting upset by that. But is that not the exact point? Is to show that the police are enforcing laws incorrectly. So I think he's just gotten to the point where I think he's overwhelmed by the situation, and it's gotten to him. And he sort of strayed away from the intent of what he originally set out to do. But unfortunately, I don't know too much about how he started, because again, he made most of the videos non-public, so I can't go back and sort of compare and watch how he has progressed from the beginning, unfortunately. And I do want to caution him, if he ever sees this video. He just got a new sign. He's doing a live stream where someone gifted him some stuff, and he got a sign. It's actually really cool. I don't support it, but it is really cool. I got to give him that. It's a gun, like a lit up gun that has little bullets that come out of it, and it shoots a mask of a police officer. and I'm sure he's going to show it around. And if he sees this, I do want to caution him because he's already. It is known that he's been making threats towards police officers, and I would wait on that one until all of this died down a little bit.
But Eric, he doesn't have that reverse. He doesn't have that e-brake, man. He's full forward, full load, man. He's a choo-choo train running out of control.
He is. He certainly is, and he's definitely got a name for himself.
But that's something that I feel sometimes this country really needs, because the people in this country have become so complacent and divided.
Sure.
And if it comes down to somebody getting arrested to really kick this society in the butt, and Eric is willing to do that, then I have a lot more respect for him, just in that he's ready to self-sacrifice himself to better the world, and I have respect for that. I see.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I'm preparing to do an audit myself. I feel like if I'm talking about these sort of things, I'm discussing, I should at least put myself in their shoes. And I'm a little nervous about it because I don't know how it's going to go. I know the law surrounding it, but what if the officer I encounter is no bueno, right? So it's definitely it's a tricky situation to get oneself in, and it definitely takes a lot of courage to do it in places certainly where one thinks that the police department is corrupt. But go ahead.
Have you ever watched Constitutional Corner?
It might have come up. It's not one that's on my radar. The ones that are on my radar tend to be the ones that are doing things wrong. So I know, I've heard of you. I know the name has come up. I don't know if I've ever seen any videos.
I have
generally the ones I watch are good.
And I'm one of those that's really super aggressive. Like,
sure.
I have one right now that went viral. I went out to protest about a Ford Focus from my parents.
Okay.
They got screwed over with that DPS-6 transmission. And we're actually in the middle of a class action with that now.
Good.
But I went down there, and I have almost 900,000 views on this video, because I'm the type of person that says, okay, you're not needed here. You're dismissed. Get the fuck away from me. And I say it just like that, in those words. I'm not there to coddle and play games. I mean, they have tasers, guns, and handcuffs. You know? So when they come over, it's hit them quick. Boom, hit them quick. And listen, what you're doing here right now is a violation. You know that stare decisis is on my side. We've got Smith versus Cummings. We've got other case law in this. So obviously we have stare decisis. There's really no reason for a cop to be there, especially if you're exercising your rights and they know it.
Sure. Now, I just released a video today on speaking of exercising one's rights. It was SGV News First, and he's real antagonistic, and he was out there with Whittier Watch in California. He was filming Edison Building. I bet that's intense. I bet it's a good time with him. But an officer showed up and said, "Hey, I'm detaining you guys because you're suspects in a burglary, potential burglary," which doesn't make sense. They're just out there filming. But based on what the officer is saying to them, it sounds like someone called the police and said, "Hey, there are these people casing a joint, right? They're preparing to break in," and the circumstances do support that. The idea that that's the information they're receiving. So if you're out there and you're approached by the police, understand that the police may have received a very different call from what's actually going on. Because if a bystander says, "Hey, there's something weird happening," like there's an assault happening. I've received calls for assaults where it's just two people yelling at each other, and we're ready to like be ripping people off each other when it's just two people having a little argument.
Assault is not battery.
Right, exactly. So
assault is not battery.
I think I want people to understand is police might be arriving to a situation and think that something completely different is going on, and it just takes a few moments to be like, "Hey, know that that's not what's happening." And then if they continue to pursue the idea that something else was going on, at that point, I mean, get angry, sure, but understand that getting angry at the police and not giving them an explanation as to why what they think is happening isn't going to help you. It's probably just going to prolong the detention.
Well, now, guys, hang on a sec. One of the questions that keeps coming up in the channel is, the fact that Eric has like an 85% rate of drop charges or winning the case. What are your thoughts on that, and how it, do you think that's why he pushes the limit because he's had such success?
I think it's given him a lot of confidence to that what he's doing is correct. However, in many of these cases, the police aren't necessarily wrong for making the arrest, but in court it becomes, what are the circumstances that led to this? And so each circumstance being different, there's going to be the potential that the ruling is going to go a different way. So if he's doing the same thing every single time, he's going to get away with it. He's going to get arrested. He's going to be dismissed, or he's going to be acquitted, and then there should be no issues with him doing that exact same thing. But that's not going to get him views on YouTube if he just does the same thing. People are going to stop watching. So he constantly finds himself in new situations, but each new situation is going to have a different application of case law, and therefore the police are technically justified in many of those situations to make the arrest to see whether or not he's actually breaking the law. Is he?
Sorry, he's in the channel. I just want to. I know you wanted to talk to him directly, so he is in the chat. If he wants to, Eric, if you want to email me and get on the panel to talk, I'm more than happy to have you on here if you want.
And I just got to address one other question too. Yes, I still look like Ben Franklin. I'm on a diet and trying to lose weight, still have the same glasses. If what I look like has nothing to do with my knowledge. So let's move on now that I've addressed that. I look like Ben Franklin, which is great because I'm a civil rights.
It's a good look.
Yeah, right.
Great look.
So, I don't care if I'm a transgender female that looks like a guy. Okay, great. That's whatever. It's my life. That's not anybody else's problem. That's my problem. I'm the one that has to wake up with myself every day. The fuck is that problem here?
You don't have to answer to anybody.
I just figured I would because I don't care. The whole thing is that I don't care. You can call me all the names you want. I don't care because I call cops names to test them. If you look at my videos, Brian will agree with this, I'm pretty sure. I'm probably one of the most aggressive auditors out there. When a cop comes, I'm there to test him to see how his patience is. I want to know if he's good with mentally ill people. I want to know how he handles his job and his calls. So I'm the biggest prick from the time he gets there until the time he leaves. And that's a test. It's an absolute test.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I said, as long as you're legal, that's what matters. My big thing is, I'm sorry to say it, but Eric doesn't want to join. I already asked him, Carolina. My only problem issue is the whole, this kill the cop sign, that stuff. I'm sorry, but I personally don't agree with. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I always say I can't tell anybody how to audit, how to act. As long as they're legal, that's all that matters. It's a limit that I personally don't agree with.
When I yell, though, I'm yelling things like, get the hell out of my face before you get held liable under Chapter 21, Title 42, United States Code Section 1983 for 14th Amendment violations, because that's the only remedy I have against you. You're going to arrest me. There's nothing I can do about it. But when it all is said and done, the money's coming out of your pocket because qualified immunity, when you have well-established case law, there goes your qualified immunity. Bye-bye.
Right. Now, understand that this comes up, speaking of qualified immunity. If the police are enforcing a statute as it is written, and there isn't a comment, for example, filming in public, a lot of people know a lot of the case law surrounding that. So if a police officer enforces a statute in violation of some sort of filming in public, they might not have qualified immunity because they're expected to know better. However, if they're enforcing a statute as it is written and there is case law that exists that isn't often referenced, something that they wouldn't necessarily know, they can't necessarily be held liable because that's what the court is for.
Case though, if the law that they're trying to enforce, let's say protesting, and they want to come and try to get me for loitering.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm sitting there and I have a sign and everything, and they come and get me. Well, technically, I'm standing around, but I'm not doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So they can come just because the statute is written like that doesn't necessarily give them carte blanche without having it affect their qualified immunity, because if they're violating or even coming in on your First Amendment activity, most departments will tell them, no, you don't go into protesters and stop them from their protesting. You don't mess with protesters. You don't go in to do that. That's against company policy.
Now, there are times where protests can be stopped because it's become too unsafe. And even though you are protected under the First Amendment, peacefully protesting, I mean, the condition is peacefully protesting or peaceably. I think it was. Yeah. So if that protest isn't determined to be peaceable, it's no longer protected. I think that's something I want to discuss around the springtime on my channel's protest, because that's when protest season starts.
I'm
down. Yeah, because there's a lot of information, and there are a lot of ways that a protest can be stopped. And then you have
Law 101 by then, so I'll be able to continue.
Good. We'll absolutely have to discuss it more then. But you have cases like Ward versus Rock against racism, which basically is a Supreme Court ruling that even in a traditional public forum, there can be restriction on the First Amendment, but it has to pass some pretty specific tests. It has to be content neutral. It has to be, I don't know. There are a few other ones that I could think of off the top of my head, but
what about
which one?
Lozman versus Riviera Beach, U.S. Supreme Court, that says that even if the cops had the right to arrest you, that does not bar you from recourse.
Well, so you still have the option of recourse, because there are circumstances.
They had a valid reason, though. He was removed from a podium at a city meeting.
Sure.
He was removed, arrested for refusing to leave, even though his time had run out. Though they had a valid reason to arrest him, his First Amendment rode over that. And in Lozman versus Riviera Beach, U.S. Supreme Court, I'm trying to remember. I'll get you the quote sometime. I'll send it to your channel. You can go read it. But it says that just because they had a valid reason to arrest him does not mean that he can't go after the cop personally.
Sure.
And go after the city personally for the First Amendment violation over and beyond the arrest.
It let him go after the police officer specifically, not just.
He went right after their qualified immunity. It was kicked back down to the 11th from Supreme Court. They obviously granted him certiorari, and that wasn't his first one, because they had destroyed his houseboat, which is why he was out there protesting and at that podium. He won that one, which is, I think, page 562 of 2014. If you go to the SCOTUS, 562 of the SCOTUS 2014 year.
So that would be under the right to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Right. And
that he was probably lucky to
his whole houseboat. They gave him, I think it was like $750,000 for his houseboat.
Wow.
They destroyed it.
For him.
Right out of the city dock and destroyed it.
Huh.
It was supposed to go up for auction. They purchased the boat before it went up on auction, the houseboat, and destroyed it before it even went up on auction, just to prove a point.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's definitely something I'll have to read more into. That's I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that.
Lozman, Lozman.
Yeah, the fact that Lozman proved the existence and enforcement of an official policy.
Yep.
Yeah. Huh.
It's going to be an interesting case for you to read.
There is a risk that some police officers may exploit the arrest powers as a means of suppressing speech. And I guess he was able to prove that that's exactly what's happening, even though they were justified legally in doing it. The motivation behind it was not lawful.
Yep.
And you see things like that with traffic quotas. Traffic ticket quotas is, yes, it's lawful to make a traffic stop as long as the intent is to maintain safety on a road. But the moment that it becomes about financial gain, it's no longer reasonable under the Fourth Amendment as a seizure goes. And so that is definitely a good thing to bring up, is the motivation behind it, even though the action is technically lawful.
Yeah, but that's a really interesting case. And actually, he was just arrested on, I I think it was the 8th of this year, again, for doing the same thing. So he's getting ready to take another third to SCOTUS.
Well, he certainly knows what he's doing this time, so I wish him the
been
best
there.
of luck.
Yeah. I just want to stay on track here a bit with this. Now, I'm not sure what is the max sentence on the retaliation charge. Do either of you know?
What is it? What is it? A second-degree misdemeanor or a second-degree felony, rather?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was. I thought somebody said it was a third-degree felony.
If it's a third-degree felony, it could be 3 to 5, I guess, with a 1-year minimum. I'm not sure how Colorado works. I think that's what it is in Florida.
See, now my thing though is like, he was standing on the sidewalk when he yelled it, which of course is a traditional public forum.
Sure.
And I mean, as much as I don't agree with what was said, he never actually outright threatened the judge. So my thing is, how is this being interpreted as retaliation? Is it because he said, I wish the judge would die, so it may cause somebody to do exactly that?
Well, the retaliation was because, according to the news sources I saw, and I'm not saying that they have it all correct, but they said it was because one of his friends was sentenced to 30 days in jail. And so the retaliation was based on that ruling.
That's not retaliation. That's bringing redress. And I'm sorry, I would quote Lozman in that case. If you're arrested for doing that and exercising your rights, that would be a perfect Lozman case right there.
Sure. Now, the question is he being charged for retaliation, or is he just being charged under threatening a judge? Because if they're not bringing it up as retaliation and just treating it strictly as the threats, then that wouldn't really factor into it much.
That's an interesting perspective on that. I still think, though, that with the past arrests that he's had, he can show a propensity from this court and from the police of harassment. And that was the key in Lozman, is that he showed the propensity for harassment, because this wasn't the first incident. I mean, he had been messed with a lot because of his houseboat between 2014 and 2018. Obviously, it's still going on. Even after he's won the lawsuit in SCOTUS. So if we're looking at precedent, and we go by stare decisis, the precedent is there for like Lozman or other freedom of speech. I mean, there's a gazillion SCOTUS rulings on the First Amendment. I mean, it's one of the biggest amendments. I just I don't see that he's going to end up with time. He's probably going to end up with either a monitor on his ankle or something really stupid, and
sort of probation.
They'll probably tell him you can't go filming anymore. You got to stay away from courthouses and all this other stuff. Unless you have court cases, they're going to try all kinds of crap with him.
You kind of said he kind of said something that even I agree with the chat on this. Is you said according to the news.
No, see, I wanted to bring that up because Eric was calling me out on that. I would have better sources, but Eric removed all of his videos, so I have to rely on what I can find, and which is why I'm not saying it's factual. It's just how things seem to be pointing, and without.
Well, him removing his videos, though, I don't. I agree, because until his cases are completed, I think that's an extremely smart move.
Absolutely, but I can only work with what I have.
You know what? Steve Tunis is absolutely correct. Eric's not going to get on a panel and discuss his case. His lawyer would stick a big fiery dildo up his butt. And he probably cut his balls off and everything just to make sure he wasn't a man anymore by the time he got done talking on our panel. That's the smartest thing he could ever do, is not join and talk to us.
Sure.
Yeah, I just see, if you're going strictly by, if they're treating this as a First Amendment case, as they should, technically, I don't see that, in my point of view as a non-expert, non-law person, I don't see how they could possibly convict him explicitly on this.
They can't, and honestly, I'm going to be honest with you guys. A lot of people think that because of his brashness and his aggressiveness. That's what I really respect about him most. His brashness and all that. They're going to convict him. I really don't think so. When you have people like Lozman that told the city council to F off before he was arrested and then ended up with a Supreme Court case in his name, I think that this could end up in federal court. I think that they're going to try to push the buttons. They're going to try to convict him in the lower courts. The district courts will pick this up and everything, and then he'll end up in a state federal. And then by the time he's done, he's going to end up in a federal district that's going to have to go back and say, no, you have to take this into account, and when you have such a high bar like the stare decisis from Lozman, I don't see him getting convicted. I really don't. I think that, he's pushing the limits of the First Amendment, but I think it's necessary. I think that he's absolutely necessary. Love him or hate him, he's doing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, Maddie. It's just the whole point is, if it's a jury trial, unfortunately, most jurors, they don't care about the First Amendment. They care about what's for dinner and, what are the kids doing right now? So that's my big concern is, like, you saw what the jury did with this, a lesser charge, a misdemeanor. So, yes, he is formerly a military police officer. But I'm just worried because, if it falls on the jury's hand and, they're going to see his actions, not his words. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm worried about, like they did with this case, the threats case.
Right. And an appeal should, if he doesn't win this, an appeal is definitely the right choice. And I think he could win this, but I think it's going to be a hard case. I think it's going to be a lot harder than some people might think, just based on the totality of the circumstances of the videos that he has released. And when he put them all together, the message that it conveys, whether or not that was the intent. So, because intent, I don't think is going to factor in too much here, because it doesn't matter if he intended for to be threatening a judge. If a message being received by his followers is to attack the judge,
right?
As long as that message conveys the right information that might be used or convince someone to actually take action, his intent is potentially going to be less of a factor than one might expect.
Everybody's looking at their ding now because Pike speaks.
Yeah, I just got that notification, but I'm into this conversation. I'll check on him, make sure he's okay later, and message him. Holy shit, I haven't even smoked weed and I look really stoned. I'm out of weed, man. I'm broke. I'm a college student.
Well, it's even Eric said in here, because I've been accused of clickbaiting using his name, and I'm like, the reality is everybody's talking about the Eric cases, as they should, and Eric agrees. These are things that need to be talked about.
Exactly. You don't just hide this shit. You don't just throw this under the carpet and say, screw you. He's one of our fellow auditors. He is one of our civil rights activists. He is one of us, and we need to at least acknowledge that he's trying to do the right thing. We need to at least see him for what he's trying to do. Eric has a big heart. I know he does.
Yeah. Eric
has a big heart. And
you're right.
I'm not gonna desert him because of this. I follow him. I'm a fan of his. I love what he's trying to do. And, he may be a little different from what I do it, but I do it different than what Blue Bacon's going to do it. I do it different from what my mentor taught me, Jeff Gray, honor your oath. That was my mentor coming through this, him and EOG. So, I'm going to do it my way. I do things my way. And something? I think I've infected Jeff Gray. Have you been watching his videos lately?
Oh yeah, I'm so behind on videos. It's not even funny.
He's been telling people off like I do lately. I think I've impacted my influence on him.
Well, it's just, again, like I said, we don't always have to agree on each other's styles. We don't have to agree on each other's choice of words. I don't agree with calling for harm or death of anybody. That's my
I,
only issue.
I know.
And
I'm not with killing anybody. I'm not about it. I don't
but
wish any cops death. I don't wish anybody death.
I
But
just, Eric has made change. Phil Turner made change. And change can be made, and they are living proof of it. It's just, my biggest issue is when they see this. Okay, here's the thing: cops used to see us as activists at best, a mild annoyance at worst. Now, you look on any sites or anything, we're called domestic terrorists, and I don't know if you saw, but News Now Houston had posted from a police supply store. They had a range target of somebody standing there holding a cell phone at a police supply store. What does that say? That's why I'm like, change needs to be made. We need to figure out how to make it. The big thing now is we need to get out from underneath this domestic terrorist thing, because that we're not going to get anywhere as long as we're put on that, under that, title. We're just not. They're not going to listen to us. They're not going to want to know what our thoughts are. They're not going to care if we know anything about the law. They're going to say these guys are just domestic terrorists. They're like those sovereign citizen idiots. Just arrest them.
well, the thing is here, and I don't criticize anybody, and I don't care how you do your audits. That's none of my business. I don't care. There's been a lot of dissent and dissension and animosity between popular channels.
Yep.
Who's more popular? Who's less popular?
Yep.
This and that. This and that. I've honestly, I jumped out of that in California when I got hemmed up at the hemming firm. Glad I left. I'll leave it at that. But when it all comes down to it, this community, this First Amendment community, even if they don't like you, stand behind you at least somewhat. Because when it all is said and done, we're all out there risking ourselves for this. And you're just as important as I am. I'm just as important as you. I would say that I've technically made a couple of impacts on this, because every time you hear an auditor say you're dismissed, who do you think started that?
Is that you?
I started that with High Desert Community Watch. He asked me if he could use it. And I'm like, yeah, that's not, I didn't patent you're dismissed, but I started all that. That was me that started all that. Now everybody's you're dismissed. But the influences that we have going on right now, the best way, if we're going to get this domestic terrorism turned around, first we have to repeal the Patriot Act. That's the first thing we have to do. We have to get that Patriot Act repealed. And the only way to do that is you have to be a practicing attorney. You're not going to get that reversed if you're not a practicing attorney. You have to take it apart. And I'm sure you'll agree with this, Blue Bacon, bit by bit. You have to take this and say, okay, this line is not a violation, but this one is.
Sure.
So you have to sue based on the verbiage of this. And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be easy, because this was done by backdoor deals. The Patriot Act was passed, I think it was like 10:59 at night, like behind closed doors. So when they passed the Patriot Act, actually, I think it went to the Supreme Court, and some of it got kicked back, if I remember right, right after the towers fell. There was something to do. It was basically turning into more of a police state, and I don't remember I'd have to look at the case again. But I know that it went to the Supreme Court, and they kicked back a piece of it. But we still have some of that left, that the 100-mile around the United States from the borders. You have that 100-mile inland, that Border Patrol. can stop you, detain you, and do all kinds of crap. And they have more power than the freaking cops do. They get away with it. They get away with it. The only ones that I've seen ever really get held for that are the ones that attacked that ludicrous guy, that lunatic. What's his name? The one that Steve Anderson, that lunatic Steve Anderson, when he got his butt kicked for not getting out of his car. They tased him like 18 times or something. I don't know, something crazy. But they beat the crap out of him and everything. And that was the only time that I've ever seen the Border Patrol get successfully litigated against.
Really?
It's so unorganized. They don't even know what their own policies are.
Sure.
So the only way we're going to get this is to repeal the Patriot Act. That's the only way we're going to get rid of this.
I'm no expert on the Patriot Act, but if you're gonna try to get rid of it, it does have to go through the proper channels. I think learning more about the law, like you're doing, is the correct way to go if that's the route that you're trying to do.
I got frustrated with not knowing enough. That's when I see all my friends getting in trouble, and I'm like, no, that's wrong, but I don't know how to say it's wrong in court lingo.
Sure.
I know it's wrong. I even know the stare decisis on it, but I can't articulate it in court properly.
Hang on. Eric just said the police union has done more damage to the law enforcement community than it has helped. Abolish the collective bargaining units.
Yep.
Do you agree?
Yep.
I couldn't speak about the police union. I was never a part of a police union. There are some questions about what it means, me being military police. It means I was law enforcement within the military, enforced federal, state, and military law. So I have a good background in a whole bunch of types of law enforcement. I've studied law in my free time as far as constitutional law goes as well, to sort of give me a better background of what I was allowed to do. And then after getting out, I served my term, my 5 years, took on another year. Ended up doing about 6. And then I got out of the military, and so I'm no longer law enforcement. That answers another one of your questions. But I was never part of a police union. I'm not qualified to speak on what exactly the police union does. But I will say that if you think the police union is an issue, that might be something worth protesting. But I do advise that you protest it carefully, because going against a union is never easy, any type of union. Especially a police union, I can't imagine it's going to be an easy.
Wait, Eric just asked you how many hours have you spent on a range?
How many hours? I could not give you a number, but I can tell you
hours I've spent.
Qualified expert on all weapon systems.
Me too.
So it's good.
I was a tow missile. So I had to do the M9, and I had to do the I had to be proficient in the 249 because that's also mounted on the top.
Sure, yep.
And I had to do the M16A2 at the time. It was Desert Storm. I went in for Desert Storm.
Good, yes. I mean,
I never left Fort Benning. I'm not a veteran. I'm not a I'm prior service. I'm not a veteran.
You serve, you're a veteran. You might not be a combat.
Yeah, I don't consider it. I got out. I ELS when they downsized. But
gotcha.
But welcome home. You served your time. We're fighting for oil right now. It's not exactly democracy, but I still respect the fact that you wanted to go get trained. And if the moment came up where you had to go to war, then you were trained already to go do that.
Yes.
And I do respect that. But everybody knows right now it's all war for oil. It's all about the oil.
There's a strong consensus on that. And I try not to get too politically involved in that, because I still do fall into the National Guard. So the opinions I can give are limited, and I'm not going to say my opinions support or go against what you're saying.
You can't, you're enlisted.
I can't. I'm not allowed. I can't. I'm not really supposed to give an opinion either way.
I'll do it for you. I'm prior service, no longer linked.
Yep.
It's a war for oil.
I'm still inactive for the next 2 years, and I'm still with the National Guard as well. So it's
And Monkey 83, I've got his back too. Like I said, Eric, I love and respect you. I'm so glad that you're okay, for one, and that you're free enough to be out here and having conversations with us. and I really do hope that you get off of this charge and nothing happens to you. You know, I hope you end up with a good 1983 that you can buy us all dinner. Does it look like I miss dinners? Come on, man. You got to buy me a good steak. Come on, man.
Okay, Bacon. There are a lot of people, of course, you had to know this was coming, but people want you to kind of justify your law knowledge. You
Yes.
know, how many hours have you spent in the law library and so forth?
Oh boy, I don't have a number. I don't keep track. It's not important to me. I don't like to say I am qualified to do this because I say so. I'd rather let my arguments speak for themselves. And if you think my argument is invalid, I love a good discussion. If you get heated with me, I may get heated back. I try to control it, but you know I deal with a lot of people, so sometimes I'm a little more aggressive than I want to be. But if you want a reasonable discussion.
I can't wait for moot court.
Right. But as far as my experience, I have 2 years as a counter-narcotics investigator, 2 years as a general crimes investigator, and then a couple more years through doing various things with the military as law enforcement goes. I did, you know, car searches. I did area security. I did general patrol work. I've been involved in cases as a legal. I hesitate to use the word expert, but as basically helping people through legal cases, and I testified in court for things as high as negligent manslaughter. So right. I have experience, but I'd rather let my arguments speak for themselves than go into, well, I'm better than you because I have this. If we look at people like Merb Beast,
you're more of a criminal justice more than pre-law. So yes. your standpoint from it is completely different than say what mine would be, because I'm going into litigation. I'm going into pre-law to fight criminal justice injustice.
Sure. And don't get me wrong, I'm biased towards the police. I'm never going to say I'm not, but I try to maintain a fair and impartial view as best as possible. Now, when it comes to explaining why something has happened, I understand what an officer might be thinking. So
if you're looking at the chat, look at what Eric just said, because I think that's a very good question.
Question matters to me. I've yet to have a cop testify that he spent much time studying the law. How to investigate and convict is not the same as knowing the law. That's true. Now, a lot of my information historically from my own training is how to enforce the law to get it to court, not how it's going to be argued in court. Because a police officer isn't supposed to be interpreting the law; they're supposed to be enforcing it as written, with very few exceptions. As far as studying the law, I'm working through starting a law degree right now. Having a criminal justice degree and all that. I want more to it, and it's mostly because Merb has been sort of lording his degree over me, and again. He gets a lot wrong.
Merb is an idiot. I don't care. I'm going to say it out loud. Merb is an idiot.
I'm not going to disagree. I don't want to insult the guy because I don't know him personally.
I said my piece.
I'll insult him all day.
He's gotten stuff.
You know something
you would expect him not to.
Yeah, he got sick of his trolls. So he booted him out of his thing because he didn't want the repercussions. I guess there were some pictures or something like that that kept getting put up, and he was going to get busted for it. He was going to get in trouble for it. So he's like, everybody's done. Get out of here. I don't care. If you guys thought that I liked you, you were wrong. I don't care about any one of you. I heard the whole video. I saw the whole video that he did. And, you know, what? Good for him, man. You know, if that's the way he feels, then, you know, it's like I said. And I said, remember, Brian, last summer I was doing videos that said, Merb, you're just digging yourself in deeper. Remember? I said this. I predicted that this was going to happen, that he was digging himself in deeper. He was aligning himself with trolls, and he was going after the auditors. The auditors, he doesn't, you know, like them or anything or whatever. And that's fine. He doesn't have to. I don't like him either. I'm not a big fan of Merb's. Personally, I think he, is a substandard attorney, but that's my opinion. He may be the best attorney in the world, and I don't know it. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I still think he's a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Eric just said something else that was quite, of course, Eric and his brain. Blue Bacon, I have analyzed many police reports. The first 2 years of their career, they write truthful and detailed reports. Then they begin losing their cases, and so they learn to write. I'm assuming he's going to say,
Absolutely, and then it changes. I'm not saying I've never seen that. We didn't have a problem with it being an issue. I'm not trying to defend the police here, especially not to all of you, because I know how you guys all feel. I'll save that for a more a different topic. I never followed up through with my cases for the most part. I was warned very early into my career. You will not like the results of what happens in court for these cases that you worked so hard on when you think that your actions were justified, and you have domestic violence victims who aren't getting justice. You have thieves that aren't paying back the victims. And you see that, and you see people get away with things based on technicalities, based on just a good defense, based on the prosecution didn't have the time to even look at the case, so they just dismissed it without prejudice. And it's very disheartening because you put a lot of work in, and most police officers that I've worked with, and I'm not going to say every police officer is like this. I'd like to hope they are similar to the people I've worked with, but I can't speak for every department. If they're anything like the department I worked with, they just want to help people. They want to make a difference. And sometimes you get into that sort of vigilante mindset where, like, well, if the Justice Department won't help these people, then I'm going to do something to help them. And it is possible that reports start getting written in a certain way that make the subject of the crime look worse because the person's just sick of the victim being a victim.
I call that the Wyatt Earp syndrome. That's what I call it. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's in the high percentages. Sure. I would say better than 85% of your police officers right now have or will write something creative just to make their report look better to prosecute, whether the person was right or wrong. And if a good cop went in there, if they were actually a good cop, they would say, okay, these are these type of steps that I'm going into. This is the kind of thing I'm going into. I better read what I'm going into before I start charging people, or before I start taking the scene like I'm Big Bo Joe and I can go in and do whatever the hell I want because I got a gun. They really need to. And how do you become an expert in 6 months? After getting 6 months training, how do you become an expert in everything? So now,
that's the thing is, you learn the basics, but you're not expected to interpret the law. You're expected to enforce it as written. There are certain, you learn, here are the elements. Here's what an element of, elements of a law are. Have they met all these elements? If yes, arrest them, and the courts will determine whether or not the situation warranted what they were doing. Right. And that's why a lawyer will have, so much more training. And a lot of the lawyers' training, from my understanding, is there's so much paperwork involved. You have to know how the courts work. You have to know how to file various things. You have to know how to defend against certain things. And it's not just about knowing the law. So saying that, 7 years of learning to be a lawyer is so much more than 6 months of learning to be a police officer. That's true. But keep in mind that being a lawyer isn't just about knowing the law. And being a police officer, your training doesn't stop at 6 months. You get 6 months to learn the basics to enforce the law, and you get continuous training after that. You're always being trained, and you're always learning new things. Every day, a new topic is discussed. At least for us, we discuss a new topic every day in what we call guard mount, which is where everyone's checking your equipment, making sure you have everything, making sure your vehicles are ready to go right before shift change. And then we have this big binder, just getting the camera, just enormous. When they flip something and go, all right, let's cover this. Let's cover, when this use of force is appropriate. Let's cover, what Supreme Court case says that you have to, or you can't be upset by the things that people are saying to you, that sort of thing. So there is constant training, but it isn't necessarily as organized.
I have an interesting thing. If you were a sheriff, let's say you're a deputy, and they give you all the equipment that you were equipped with as an MP.
Sure.
Your vests, your guns in here, tactical, all this stuff. You show up looking like an army soldier with a badge.
Sure.
Okay. Don't you think that has implications to posse comitatus?
Well, I do want to say that when I enforced the law, I was in uniform, but that wasn't abnormal on it because I was on a military installation. Now, I did have the ability. Some people are asking, can I enforce law on civilians? Yes, I absolutely could. They had to be within my territorial jurisdiction. But as far as equipment goes, I actually carried less equipment than most police departments. And that sounds scary until you realize that I didn't.
How do you feel about the posse comitatus with the way, the 1033 program say? The 1033 program for the cost of shipping will send military gear to any sheriff, any state police, any local city. All you have to do is pay for the shipping and the taxes.
And I'll get to that. So my equipment wasn't great. I worked with law enforcement that had more gear than I did, and they were more equipped to deal with all sorts of situations. And an officer with more gear on isn't something to be afraid of necessarily. It means that, the less lethal they have, for example, the less likely they are to draw a gun. So seeing them have a lot of equipment is a good thing in many cases. Now, if they're in a tactical uniform that's camouflage or whatever, it might look weird. But really, what that's doing is, that gear has to be recycled. You can only use gear for so long in a combat environment before it is required to be swapped out. Just because, that's a no-fail situation. When you have troops in combat, regardless of whether or not you support the law. We're just talking about lives here. Troops in combat, they have to have functional equipment to save their own lives. So there is an enforced limit on how long you can use a vehicle. Like, I think tactical vehicles, they can't be used over like a certain thousands of miles. They have to be shipped back to the state for training. But, police find
I used to take them out of Red River. I used to take them from Red River up to Pennsylvania as a truck driver. But no, really, you don't see that as a violation of posse comitatus?
No, posse comitatus
stuff like that
isn't what they're wearing, because they're not technically active duty law enforcement, so they're not controlled by the federal government, right? I think the concern of posse comitatus was that the federal government getting police powers was dangerous.
No, it was just turning the army. It doesn't say the federal government. It doesn't say the state. It says turning the army on the people is illegal. When you arm a bunch of people who are prior service, let's say most of them, they may have even had a clerk's job in the military, but they're prior service, okay? Which is preferential to...
Hold on, guys. Sorry, I don't mean to cut in. We're kind of getting a little off topic here, but...
Sorry.
Eric just brought up the Stephanie Osborne. Are you aware of that?
Let me refresh my memory on Stephanie Osborne. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that. I might be.
Eric said, well, basically on her recorded on her body cam, the sheer glee in her voice when she said, "Oh yeah, Sarge, I can articulate this one all day long if you give me the go ahead." In other words, she can make up whatever she wants and call it interference. So
that sounds, I don't know the situation. I have to see that exact thing. But if I'm telling my sergeant, right, if I'm calling up and say, hey, to my patrol supervisor, for example, saying, I can, they're doing this thing. What they're doing isn't necessarily conducive to, the safety of people, or people are disliking it. And so a bunch of people are saying, hey, can you deal with this person? And then they do something, and I can say, I can articulate that is in fact a crime. I'm not necessarily going to be, unhappy about it because, hey, I'm now able to help the other people who are complaining, right? We as a police officer, I have to sort of factor in how society is feeling about a certain action. So if I'm getting a lot of complaints about someone, running around naked in their backyard screaming, the moment I find a way to stop that from happening so that other people can feel safer in their neighborhood, I'm going to be pretty happy about that. And it's not, I don't know necessarily because I haven't seen it, so I can't comment fully. I can tell you how I would approach the situation. I'm not happy that I'm, detaining and arresting that person. I'm happy that I'm helping someone else who is not happy with the situation, or a group of people who aren't happy with the situation. So once the crime can be articulated.
Now, there's a difference between, and you see a lot of this in First Amendment videos. There's a difference between people complaining about lawful activity and people complaining about unlawful activity.
Sure.
And what we find more here in the First Amendment community is the fact that cops come up and say, well, these people don't like it, you're going to have to move along. And they don't even consider the First Amendment. They don't even consider the Constitution. They don't care. It's I call it the McDonald's drive-through of law enforcement. Get out there, get that call done as soon as possible, no matter what it takes. Doesn't matter the situation. Just do it, get it out of there, and go to the next one.
Well, that's the thing is most people, especially regular Joes out there. First off, how many times have we seen you can't film me without my permission? You know, that's one of the favorites that we see all the time. But the other thing that people don't realize is traditional public forums. So many people don't know what that means. And there's, Australia has a law. It's called the Move Along Law. And it's literally a cop can come up to you anywhere in Australia and say, move along. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Doesn't matter where you are. You have to move or you'll get arrested. It's a similar to interference that we have here. Now, I believe what Eric was referring to is that the cop, he says she had literally just discovered the interference charge. And basically, it was like a green light for her to see people like us and say, oh, they're interfering. Boom, get rid of them. And we have, we have to stand our ground and say, assuming we're on one, but we say traditional public forum.
Sure.
I'm standing here. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm recording because the First Amendment says I can.
Absolutely. Now I haven't seen the video, I don't think, so I don't want to, be making excuses. I do want to address Jeremiah Raber, who says my body language says I'm uncomfortable. I'm sitting on a mattress. My legs are going numb. So, no, I'm doing just fine. Thank you. But as far as interference goes, so things you got to keep in mind, are you doing an audit or are you doing a cop watch? Because if you're doing a cop watch and you're obstructing an investigation, for example, they have a traffic stop and you're 5 feet from them yelling, they can absolutely ask you to step back, and if you fail to do so, that can be considered obstruction because you are distracting them from their lawful duties. So things that a lot of auditors, especially some of the newer ones, don't understand is the police can stop you from doing what you're doing if it's distracting them from their actual job. Now, if they're just standing around eating a donut, right, and you come up to them and start yelling, all right, well, that's not. They're not doing anything important, so they're probably not interfering with anything. But the moment that they're actually, responding to a call, they have a lot of freedom to say, hey, you're stopping me from being able to do this. So these are definitely things that you should keep in mind if you're going to be doing auditing, if you're already doing auditing.
Well, I can tell you this, knowing Jeff Gray, Jeff has been to hell and back. And he's gotten a couple of T-shirts, a couple souvenirs. I mean, he's got the battle wounds that he's been down there. If you ask me, in the community, there is nobody better, especially representing the First Amendment community, than Jeff Gray from Honey Grove. He is number one. I'm gonna, I've followed him. He's the reason why I got into it. He's number one. But there's a lot of good ones out there. High Desert, News Now Houston. There's a lot of people that are getting those views out there and exposing a lot of that stuff without getting too boisterous. Notice I didn't include myself in that because I'm a mouth. I'm a total mouth. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'll tell somebody to F off so quick. To me, I don't lose anything from it. I'm an ex-biker. I used to be passed over, and I don't play games. I'm just as quick to tell somebody to F off. I'm not interested. I'm exercising my rights. Get the fuck away from me. Not playing games. It is what it is. And I think if more people got really stern with cops, then they wouldn't, because the whole thing is that they try to use intimidation and they try to use the whole position thing. Like, if you don't know you're right and a cop tells you you don't have the right, you're done.
I can't stand the intimidation. I can't. When it comes to police officers trying to intimidate, no, I
laugh at them.
It's
Well, now, have you ever turned in a cop, though, Blue?
Yes, I have. I've turned in police officers who've committed crimes. It doesn't happen often, but over 6 years, I think there have been 3 that I addressed concerns when I said this activity is illegal, something needs to be done. There have been a few others where it came close, and I sat down and said, this behavior will change. I'll be keeping an eye on you. But over my career, I believe there were 3 police officers who I did report to higher up the chain of command.
I respect that.
Okay, yeah.
I think police officers should hold each other accountable. Absolutely. And I'm not going to say it doesn't happen.
Yeah, let's be serious, though. What does the thin blue line really mean? It doesn't mean support cops. Let's tell them what it really means.
So I can tell you exactly what it was intended to mean. It means the thin blue line. It comes from the thin red line, which is from the 1800s in England. So the thin blue line, and it has meant this for quite a while, it is the line of police officers separating order from chaos. That is its intent. Now, other people have taken that meaning and turned it in a different way. And if you have a thin blue line flag, well, that's not what it was ever intended to mean. That's what other people have taken and interpreted.
But that's what it's done. If you look at cases like Diop Kamau out in New York, he's proven it out in New York. He's proven it out in California. And so is High Desert, and so is all these other really big auditors. They've proven that the thin blue line is a cover-up line. You don't cross the thin blue line, because if you do, your next call, you might not get the backup you need.
I'm
or they might be a little slower getting their coffee to come help you.
So one of the things I liked about, and that is a good point. One of the things I liked about military police is that you didn't stay anywhere for more than 2 to 3 years. I understand that certainly in some of the more rural areas, the police department are pretty arm in arm, right? In the military police, you didn't get that. You were moving every few years, and no one was going to risk their reputation or their career on you for defending you for doing something stupid. So if you did something stupid, you were screwed, and you had to police yourself, and other people had to police you. And they did. And you'll notice if you ever see a video of military police, is they tend to be a little more cautious. They tend to be pretty friendly.
I'm just going to do the hour and a half shameless plug here.
Sure.
For anybody that's looking and interested, this is my robot I'm building. It's going to be a hexapod with 6 legs. So if anybody wants to, help me out on it, link is in the description. That's my shameless plug.
Buy now. You should have sold at least one.
Sure.
Yeah, right? Only $3,000. Order now. Now, Blue, a lot of people, honestly, they're calling you every name in the book.
I'm used to it.
Police apologist, blue sucker, and all that other fun stuff. Now, I've kind of considered you more as a neutral person since I met you. You kind of looked at both sides. Mm-hmm. Steve Pinder is much the same way. Steve Pinder trains cops in martial arts, but he also supports some auditors. So, do you have anything you'd like to say to that? I mean, especially Patrick DeCambra, he seems to be your biggest fan. So
yeah, he's been on my. He says he doesn't know who I am. He said that earlier in the stream. He's been on my channel commenting. So I'm sorry I'm so forgettable. But I let people know straight out of the bat. I am biased towards police. I was a police officer, so I understand the thought process behind it. I understand that people might interpret the desire to do good things for a community as negative. And I think a lot of that comes from a misunderstanding of the proper application of law. And you might disagree with what the proper application of law is, but I wanted to start this channel. It was never supposed to be about auditors. The auditors was just supposed to be where I started to sort of get my feel for things and sort of just develop some videos and figure out how to do that. And then it sort of became popular, and people, there's a lot I don't know about the auditing community because I base a lot of my content off of what people bring to my attention. So I mean, I make that very clear about my position. In my actual videos, this green screen is replaced by, a blue background with a blue line that goes right around here. And I've gotten called out for that a lot, and I don't apologize for it, because in my mind, the blue line is supposed to help people. And I haven't experienced the things that a lot of people claim I'm involved in, where it's, police protecting other police officers. Now, I was military police. My experience was slightly different than you find in county or state or your local area. And I can't speak for all departments, but what I can say is the officers I worked with were a decent group of people who just wanted to do the right thing, with very few exceptions. And the ones that were real bad, I reported. So yes, I'm pro law enforcement. Yes, I will defend the police, but I'll only defend them where they need defending. I will be, after I start discussing protests in the spring, I'm going to be going into use of force. It's going to be alternating videos, lawful use of force and unlawful use of force. I'm going to be calling out a lot of police officers in the videos on YouTube, saying this is absolutely wrong. If a police officer is doing this, you should be asking questions. But if you have a problem with the police, you have to do it through the proper channels. You have to address those issues through the proper channels. You can't just scream and rant over the internet. Not saying that any of you guys are doing that, but you see a lot of people doing it. You have to file complaints, take it as high as you think it needs to go, and address those issues, because I absolutely don't want bad police officers. That's the last thing I want, because I'm subject to the law as well. If I have to deal with a bad police officer, I'm probably going to mouth off to them as well, because I know what I'm talking about. And if they decide, nope, I have more authority than this dude, and they try something, it's not going to be pretty. So obviously I don't want a bad police officer anywhere, but I do understand the mentality behind it. I understand how the law works. And too many people that I talk to and I try to inform about this will reject my information because it disputes what they think, what the opinions they have. Even though it is factual, they just don't like hearing it. So I encourage you guys, I'm not saying like the police, I'm not saying dislike the police, but I am saying make sure you know the law and don't oppose educating yourself on it because of your own personal biases and your own personal opinions.
What state are you in?
Hold on. I got a two-part thing here. First off, people keep saying, and you've already said you were willing to, but
sure.
People are wondering, why don't you go do an audit or be backup for somebody else? And I know you said you'd be interested. So if you want to kind of tell people where you're at or how they can reach you to
sure.
to go do that, that's part one of it. And part two, Defend asked a really good question because I deal with it too. What are your thoughts on disability, ADA, and compliance, and how especially cops, seem to not have the training necessary to deal with people like myself? Defend is also hearing impaired, a lot more so than I am. And we have Blind Justice, who's legally blind.
Sure. At that point, I mean, police aren't gonna suspect that you have a disability unless it's very clear, and it's very tricky sometimes. I never received any training on it, and that's a problem. And so I think advocating for less money to go to the police isn't necessarily a good thing because it limits the amount of training. Because you have to maintain vehicles, you have to maintain equipment. Training comes afterwards. Not necessarily a good thing, but when it comes to the lives of police officers, I think it's understandable that's what's going to come first. Now, when it comes to recycling equipment, you're talking about the use of military equipment and recycling it. I think it can be a little intimidating, but if it allows more budget for training, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it would violate the Posse Comitatus Act, but I mean that would be a different discussion that I'd love to have sometime.
I'd love to have that. Absolutely.
We were fortunate. We had a couple officers that knew sign language, which wasn't a requirement. I think it should be. I think there should be some simple classes. But if you have a speech impediment, if you have a sight impediment, you're going to have to be patient with the officers because they're going to listen to you if you're calm and polite to them. If you're not calm and polite, an officer is going to think what they want to think. And unfortunately, that might not be the right answer, but at least starting compliant is going to be helpful. Because if I'm on scene and you're a jerk to me, I'm going to be a lot less patient, right? Because there's only so much patience I actually have to show or use, and then
I push it right to the end too.
Yeah, no, and like I took the insults all day, but if you're stopping me from my investigation and I think you're doing it intentionally, like there's going to be an issue, and I'm at the very least going to sit you down on the curb and make you stay there until the investigation is over. Unfortunately, I maybe had to do that twice, but usually those people were very drunk, so they kept walking through my crime scene. You can't have that. You can't have them do that. But when it comes to if you have a disability, think carefully about how you can do your audit, right? I know there's an incident with Johnny 5 I think Monkey's in the chat. Monkey has audited with Johnny. I have a video with Monkey, I'm pretty sure, where I discuss an incident outside of Edwards Air Force Base. I'm sure he remembers that. But Johnny was in a VA hospital with Bell for Freedom, I think it was. And Bell for Freedom had a cast on her leg, an injury, and while she's being handcuffed, she collapsed. Now, my personal opinion is that she did it intentionally. It didn't appear that anything the police officers did actually made her lose balance. But if that was the case, resisting the police is not the way to go if it's going to end up in an injury, if it's going to be detrimental to anything. Make it clear that you don't agree with them and then file a complaint later, because
I just go limp. If they're going to,
sure.
I've never been arrested. I've never been, my longest detainment was in Las Vegas for 30 seconds until that Sergeant Menzie got real scared because they had, I don't know, what was it, Brian? Like 400 calls in like 60 seconds.
Oh,
it was insane. Like in Las Vegas. Oh my God. It's on my thing that he gets schooled by a call flood. You can look it up on my channel. It's still the same channel, Cool Media. I just changed the name from Constitutional.
Sure. I have you written down. I'm going to be checking that out and watch some of your stuff. For sure.
But yeah, he got put in check by a call flood. And his quasi detainment, he said, "Yeah, I gotta know who you are. You're detained." I walked away from him.
Sure.
Yeah, see, it's that a lot of that falls under the category of you need to know how far you are willing to go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When you walk out there, I've seen auditors get arrested for saying nothing at all. I've seen
Silent citizen. He was big on. He kept getting arrested, not saying anything. That was one of his things. He didn't say anything. You have to remain silent. It's not just because when you get detained. It's not just when you go to court. You have the right to remain silent from 0 hours to 2400. It doesn't matter.
Now, I do want to say there are some states where if you are suspected of suspicious criminal activity, and yeah, generally filming is not a crime. Not always true, but usually that is true. That is correct. For the example, like with the video I posted very recently about SGV News First, is his activity was indicative of a potential burglary. So he was detained for it, and I think it was a justified detention. Some states, if you are detained, you're required to present identification to a police officer. But there are other states like Texas, off the top of my head, you can't be compelled to provide identification to a law enforcement officer until either you've been arrested or you are the driver in a lawful traffic stop.
The state law doesn't matter because when it all comes down to it, Terry versus Ohio is the stare decisis, the law of the land. So
Terry v. Ohio was reasonable suspicion.
Crime, unless you can prove that there was a crime that happened, one is occurring or one will occur, that is the criteria. Regardless, I don't care what the state says. I don't care.
But that's reasonable suspicion. That's for a detention. That's for a detention. You can't be compelled to identify yourself if you're not detained. But once you're detained, it does fall under state and county law as to what the police can compel you to do.
Illegal detention, I would walk away from it. I'll tell you right now.
If the detention is legal, and they can articulate certain things.
Hold on a second. I must have missed something here because, like I said, my speech text doesn't always pick you guys up.
Sure.
Lady D and several other people have indicated that you, Blue, insinuated that Bell was faking.
Oh, I'm not saying she was faking. I'm saying that I don't think anything the police did would have caused her to collapse like that. It was a very standard handcuffing. They were being very gentle with her, and she fell to the floor. And it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to say that it was intentional, but I'm saying that if it was not intentional, and you do have an injury, and I have a video on this one actually. There are questions you should ask yourself: is how far, and this goes back into how far you're willing to go. You know, are you willing to risk further injury to make the police look bad, potentially, or to show that the police are doing the wrong thing? And if you're not willing to do that, I would recommend not taking that risk.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, this one I'm just going to have to disagree with you on because
That's fine.
You're getting tag teamed on this one, buddy.
No, that's fine. I'm saying that as a personal opinion, right? I'm not saying that as a fact. That's just how I feel.
Override stare decisis or stare decisis. You know,
and that's fine.
Terry versus Ohio is the law of the land as far as stop and ID goes.
Sure.
There's no other law. There's no other precedent right now that's above it.
Let me ask you this now. Wait, that wonderfully wonderful lunatic Mouse said something about stop and ID was recanted in like 1986 or whatever.
It was in the 90s.
It's not a true thing. Now, I'm in New York State. I called around and I called the law library down in Albany and I asked, you know, is it still on the books as stop and ID or is it something else? And they said, no, it is still worded as stop and ID with the stipulation of probable cause is required. Not reasonable articulable suspicion, but probable cause is required for an ID.
That would depend on the situation. So probable cause is to make an arrest. Reasonable suspicion is to make a detention. If that makes sense.
Isn't reasonable suspicion the same thing as mere suspicion?
As what?
Mere suspicion. It was a term that Law and Smoke, who's a law professor, former cop and all that, was talking about, which is basically a cop's gut feeling.
No, you have to have articulable evidence even for a reasonable suspicion, but it doesn't have to amount to actually establishing the elements of a crime.
Yeah,
so there are certain...
I think this one's falling short because, you know, if you pushed it too far, you might end up with, oh God, what was that one? Under the Eighth Amendment, Rochin versus California. If you push it too far and that person is, let's say, mentally defective, maybe they have a disability or something like that,
right,
and you keep pushing it, if it ends up on your body camera or it ends up on somebody's camera that you do that and they push it, if it shocks the conscience, you're done.
Yeah, it won't be held up in court for sure. That's something you definitely have to be careful of.
So I mean, you know, between Terry versus Ohio and Rochin versus California, I'm going to have to categorically disagree with you. And I'm just a law student. I don't really, you know, I don't claim to know everything, but I would think that the stare decisis on this would completely disagree with you. You have to have RAS before, during, or after. It has.
Yes, we're talking about reasonable suspicion, reasonable articulatable suspicion. That is enough for a detention. And in some states, if you are detained under RAS, then you do have to identify yourself. However, there are other states where you actually need probable cause that a crime has occurred, is occurring, or will occur to be compelled to present identification. It's dependent on the state, but the bare minimum is RAS.
You know, P&P brings up a good point. Steve says, why do we have so many videos of cops admitting no crime but still detained?
Because you can detain on the suspicion that a crime might be occurring, but it has to be reasonable. You have to have, sorry, I'm plugging my computer. So if you suspect that there are certain indicators of criminal activity, you can detain someone for a reasonable time, which is generally a pretty short amount of time, to determine whether or not that criminal activity is occurring. So for example, let's say I see a bunch of people in dark hoodies walking around a neighborhood where I know that drug activity is occurring, and I see one of them has a gang symbol. And it's a gang symbol that, last week I just busted a bunch of them carrying a backpack full of cocaine. Well, I can articulate, all right, so they appear to be members of the gang. I know the gang is involved in drugs, and they're in the area where the drugs are being moved. I'm going to detain them and just ask them a couple questions. Now, I could probably justify that as reasonable suspicion. But after a few questions, if there's no other information available as to a criminal activity, and if they say, no, you can't pat me down, no, you can't search me, and depending on the state, no, I will not give you my identification, great, now I have to let them go. And like that stop would probably last a couple minutes.
It's a travesty for you to even ask for identification.
There's nothing wrong with asking. The issue is ordering them. Asking is absolutely allowed.
There's a difference between asking and demanding. I know that. I mean, but guys, I actually we've been on almost 2 hours now, and I do have to go take care of some stuff. I encourage either one of you to open up your own stream. And I mean, StreamYards is free. So, I appreciate having you guys on here. I was going to try to have Mouse on here, but I don't feel like having a head explode tonight, and I'm pretty sure he's checking down anyways.
So, I'm sure he'll talk about us.
Oh, yeah, I love him to pieces. He's a good guy, guys. Right. He's got a good heart. I've been following him since the start, and he's a good guy.
He does not have a good heart. He doesn't have good anything. But
no, I don't. I just know him from the videos and talking to him.
Go check out Desert Sentinel is Dead.
Okay. I don't know, but anyway, but I don't hate anybody. I support everybody. I don't care if I don't like the way you do it or whatever. I respect your right to do it, and if you want to go to jail doing it, that's your business.
Well, no, that's not the issue with Mouse. Mouse is. I'm not going to get into it right now because it'll just go into a huge thing, and
your prerogative.
Available and actually have him on here to defend his own things or whatever, but in the interim, like I said, I encourage one of you guys to start your own stream now. I mean, a lot of people are still talking and asking you guys questions, especially you, Blue. So
yeah, I think all of your followers hate me now. So
well, you know what? Fine. I understand. I understand both of your view and theirs. I get it on both sides. That's why I always say, everybody has their own opinion as long as they're legal. I mean, the more knowledge we have, the better. No matter who the source is, as long as that source is accurate. Which is why I was glad to have CC on here, because I knew she could help verify what you were saying. Everybody knows.
Well, I didn't exactly verify everything, but
I know you've been around for years. We know that you've been studying law for a long time now. So we know that you're a trusted person, and we know that you're not going to try to sugarcoat it just to make Blue look good. So
I don't need it.
No, you guys. I'm going to say what I think is true, and I've given a few opinions in here that people didn't like. But if you come to me and you're asking questions, you want to know some lawful stuff, I'm more than happy to help.
Well, I want to finish this before I go real quick, because I'm being called Ben Franklin. I just want to finish this with a quote. Those who would give up essential liberties for a little bit of temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Ben Franklin. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
All right. Thank you for being here. Everybody in the chat, I appreciate you all hanging out with me and Blue and CC and, yelling at us and calling us funny names and everything else. I appreciate it. If anybody want to contribute, shameless plug, here's my robot. You want to contribute?
Buy a robot, people. Buy his robot, damn it.
Well, no, I need help building it. Screw selling it.
Help fund them.
So,
all right, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thank you, guys.
Good night, guys. Stay safe, be free.